This is Art Sense, a podcast focused on educating and informing listeners about the past, present, and future of art. I'm Craig Gould. On today's episode, I speak with Jordan Schnitzer, the world's foremost collector of prints and multiples. In the conversation, we discuss Jordan's undeniable passion for art, his thoughts on collecting, and his unwavering support for arts programming. In particular, we delve into his support of a current exhibition at the Getty, titled First Came a Friendship, Sidney B. Felsen and the Artists at Gemini G.E.L. For over 5 decades, Gemini G.E.L. co-founder Sidney B. Felsen has documented the vibrant life and creative processes at Gemini through his love of photography. This has resulted in an unmatched historical record of some of the most influential artists of the last 60 years, including Robert Rauschenberg, Claes Oldenburg, Ellsworth Kelly, Jasper Johns, Lichtenstein, Frank Gehry, and Julie Mehretu. Felsen's intimate photographs, which capture the collaborations and friendships that have shaped Gemini's legacy, are on view at the Getty through July 7th. And now, a conversation about collecting, creativity, and collaboration with Jordan Schnitzer. Jordan Schnitzer, thank you so much for joining me today on the Art Sense podcast. Jordan, you're really known as being one of the world's foremost collectors of prints and multiples, and probably one of the best people to talk to about this show that's up at the Getty right now. First Came a Friendship, Sidney B. Felsen and the Artists at Gemini G.E.L. It's made possible by the generosity of you and the Harold and Arlene Schnitzer Care Foundation. Jordan, where would you start to explain to folks on the outside exactly what the magical nature of Gemini G.E.L. is and was, and how it all came together, and Sidney specifically, what he's been able to catalog and capture over these years?
Love to. Let me start by the minute and a half history about how I got to get in the art world, and that is that as an only child, when I went to first grade, my mother enrolled in the Portland Art Museum Art School, now called Pacific Northwest College of Art, that operates in the Harold Arlene Schnitzer Design Center, and the dean is the Jordan Schnitzer Dean. But anyway, so that opened the door to our family of art. 3 years later, the main teachers in town, who, where are the artists that can support themselves solely by selling their work? Most of them have to teach. They convinced her to open the first contemporary Northwest Art Gallery in 1961. So my first love is art of our region. She had artists from Portland, Seattle, San Francisco. The only names most of your audience would know is Mark Tobey, Robert Arneson, a few, but others were so important to us. And frankly, I think their work is as good as anything anywhere. But not everybody can be in New York or London or LA, a bit, whatever. So when she turned the gallery over to one of her assistants, I wanted to stay committed to art of our region. But I saw a exhibition of prints and multiples of what I'll call the New York School, Robert Rauschenberg, Hockney, Jasper Johns, whatever. And of course, I was familiar with all those artists. I'd actually bought 3 prints of Ed Ruscha, and I bought a Tom Wesselman print earlier, but otherwise all the art was mainly paintings and sculpture of Northwest artists. And I thought, I want to stay committed to art of the region, but this might be fun. So I went to a gallery that I knew that specialized in works on paper, and I bought a small Frank Stella, triangular kind of purple thing. I bought a Hockney from the Blue Guitar series. When Picasso died, a number of artists paying homage to Picasso did a series of work, and Hockney did these 10 prints, of which I just bought the first. Now I have the whole set. And then I bought a Jim Dine, a heart, a skull, and a cross. And as I was leaving, I saw a Ellsworth Kelly and a Frankenthaler and a Motherwell. Oh my God! So the art obsession, whether it was the water or the middle of the night, the art god, maybe she visited me and shot me up with the obsession, but it hasn't stopped since. Now, we have over 20,000 paintings, prints, sculptures, and so forth, and I love all mediums. But the reason why I in particular have focused on prints is, people growing up in Texas, in many states, we have a wonderful relationship with the outdoors. But for so many out there, millions, they still think going to museums whether it's art, natural history, is for some elitist few, for somebody else. And I guess because I was so lucky, having my mother opening the art door for us, and art meant so much to me from the time I was in grade school. I've said before, for me, waking up without art around me would be like waking up without the sun. And we can go on a longer tirade about why I think art is even more important now, that word now, than ever. And actually going on that point for a second, and this gets back to why Sid Felsen is, I put him on such a pedestal. But in the day, the pop artists, like all artists before them, I always say artists are chroniclers of our time, whether it's Egyptian art, Mayan art, caves in France. Now, they often do work that's just pretty, that we smile and look at, but mostly they do work that challenges us and forces us to deal with values of the time. So the pop artists, for instance, after World War II, television came, Madison Avenue marketing, they were dealing with how does the individual maintain their sense of self when they're being told to use Clairol hair products and drive a Bel Air Chevrolet and smoke Marlboro cigarettes. Today, I wish we could have Andy Warhol back and say, look at the smartphone, Andy. You were worried about television? All of us, especially younger people, are bombarded with being told exactly where to on a real-time basis. So the reason why I think art right now, for all of us that enjoy art, our obligation is to help, especially young people, be able to get to a museum, get to see public art on the street, go to a gallery, because there's no question in my mind, and I would think I would have agreement from everybody about this, that the best we do as of human beings, yes, we've got to work to put food on the table, but the best we do in society from time immemorial is art and culture, dance, music, visual arts. It is the best expression of our creative genius. Of course, medicine, technology, all those things are critical to us also. But as long as those doctors can keep us alive, we need a place where our hearts and minds can soar. And art is one of the major categories for that. So in terms of the importance of art today, as I said, imagine you were a fourth or fifth grader. I'm older. I was inspired by John Kennedy. Imagine today, younger people, the partisan divide, the way this country is being torn apart, whether one likes the presidential candidates or not. There's a lot of rancor. So I think art is critical because it's a place where young people, and that's whether you're 2 or 102, can be inspired and feel hope and feel good about themselves. Now, regarding Sid Felsen, in the decades since he and the late Stanley Grinstein founded Gemini G.E.L, I think many of us know the story. Both were involved in World War II. They came back. They enrolled in USC. They both were in a Jewish fraternity and got to know each other. Sid became an accountant. Stanley from Seattle was running a family Heister lift truck business in Los Angeles, but they stayed pals. And after a number of years, Sid Felsen called Stanley up and said, I'm going to just audit some art classes at UCLA. Do you want to join me? And they did. And after a few years, they both said, you know what? Let's create a print publishing business. So Gemini G.E.L was formed in the 60s. And I think without trying to boast for them, there's been no more important print publishing company. It is the most important of the last 60 years. The 76 artists that they published work is legendary. Yes, there have been important galleries during that time. But in terms of the most important artists of our time, how they were lucky enough, cosmically the stars were aligned for the artists and Gemini, that collectively in that partnership created some of the most important art of our generation.
The names are just simply amazing. And, they didn't start at the bottom and work their way up. I mean, they started with their first release was with Joseph Albers. And then within a year, they brought in Robert Rauschenberg. And I guess what in my mind really sets Gemini G.E.L apart is just how collaborative, pushing the boundaries technologically, opening up a world of possibilities to these artists, which kind of transforms their practice. It's almost like getting on a plane and going to Gemini was like going to an artist residency and, playing in a brand new sandbox, right?
It's a wonderful way to say that. And one thing about Sid Felsen and why this exhibition at the Getty is so important is he's been, to say an amateur photographer is incorrect, but he never considered himself a professional photographer. But in his quiet way, when the artists were working in the studio with the master printers, James Reed, Javier, he was there taking pictures all the time. So you have the most intimate 25,000 photographs he's donated to the Getty, which has one of the largest photo collections, 1.2 million in the country. It documents the time and place of the most important artists of our time, not only with them working, but playing basketball, riding a bike, laughing, joking, at parties. It's a unique lens of the eye on who these individuals were, these men and women, that were so gifted. And that gift was translated into work that has challenged us, frustrated us, but more than anything, made us think.
The exhibit at the Getty really highlights Sidney's just compulsive photo taking, which is such a great record of these artists and the way they were working. But in the exhibit, it's really interesting to see these calendars, these working calendars of who's coming, what's due, what's going on, and all of these photos that have just kind of been cut and cropped and stuck chronologically as things took place. It's a really interesting record of that time.
Very much so. Now, in terms of the Getty, it's one of the major art institutions in the world. And actually, my association with the Getty began, maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago with Ellsworth Kelly. They started a Getty Medals, and they were honoring Ellsworth Kelly. I was fortunate to publish his catalog raisonné, get to know Ellsworth and his partner, Jack Shear, very well. And I said, certainly, we'd like to support that. And that led to our funding every year a major exhibition. Jack Shear, bringing that name up, he was wonderful in that he used the funds from Ellsworth's foundation and his own funds to purchase or fund the purchase of those 25,000 photographs from Sid Felsen for the Getty. So he's an important person here, too, to thank for getting the work there. In terms of the exhibition, what is wonderful about it for anyone that knows nothing about art and artists, they've done a brilliant job of taking us on a historical journey of Sid Felsen, Stanley Grinstein, the Gemini G.E.L team over the years, the master printers, the gallery staff, others, through the last almost 70 years of the major artists of our time and actually helping show us how the sausage is made. Okay. So you don't need to know anything about art, anything about artists, anything about Sid Felsen, but I can guarantee for any of your listeners that visiting to this is like a very quick college class in the major artists of our time and the particular production facility that did works on paper that are just incredible.
I thought it was really interesting when I was reading more about Gemini, just the story of how Frank Stella wound up moving to the West Coast to take a job at UC Irvine with his wife, Barbara Rose, but they wanted him to sign an oath to the U.S. government, which he wouldn't do. And so he just like, well, I don't even have to work right now. So he would just go and hang out at Gemini and was just kind of in the way. And eventually Rauschenberg's like, take this and go draw something in the corner. And that became his Black series, right? I mean, that's wonderful folklore.
It is. And I think that also brings out the fact that, look, when Gemini started with these artists, they weren't the giant, they weren't who they became as artists over time. I mean, Gemini was taking a risk on some young artists that Sid and Stanley had a gut sense about and spent the money to create their work. But the magic here is you look at the names they worked with, very few are artists that didn't go anywhere. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This is like going and winning the art lottery. It's just staggering. And I mean, I don't know how to explain this anymore without sounding syrupy or whatever. It was a cosmic luck of the art draw for both Gemini G.E.L and these artists. They were peers. They were young, not quite emerging, but pretty close to it, artists. Now, you also mentioned the technology. You know, prints have been made for 500 years. You can actually buy at auction Albert Dürer print for, $1,000, 1567, whatever, 1510. I mean, but something happened after World War II. A woman named June Wayne graduated. She started a program at Tamarind on Tamarind Street, where she said, I'm better off helping teach people to become master printers because I love works on paper. So she started the first real program of teaching people to be very sophisticated. And it's because of the people like Gemini, the half dozen major master printers there and the dozens and dozens of other printers, but they had the time to explore technologically. Richard Serra, you mentioned.
Right.
James Reed told me, who worked there 33 years, he spent 9 months trying 200 different kinds of paint to get the viscosity that Richard Serra wanted in his works on paper. They tried auto paints. They tried house paints. Also, they finally ended up with what's called a paint stick. It's like a big crayon that's all sticky. And they take those and put them in a big Hobart mixer, and they put some special ingredients in, and they turn the mixer on and make this soupy sort of, call it paint, that ends up having that amazing texture to their work. When Lichtenstein wanted to put Mylar on a piece of paper, other things. So many artists still work in their own studios and can make prints on their own presses. But most of the biggest ones have utilized the brilliant partnership with, whether it's Robert Lococo, whether it's Two Palms Press in New York, whether it's Crown Point Press in San Francisco, the amazing Catherine Brown, Gemini G.E.L, the half dozen other major print houses, and Tandem Press at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. When I'm asked by people sometimes, what do you think about digital prints or this technology or whatever, I say, look, we shouldn't restrict artists from using any medium, any technology they want to let them express their artistic voice for all of us.
I can't tell you how many painters I talk to who say, I was painting and then I took a diversion to spend X amount of time working in the print shop, and it totally changed the way I paint. It totally changed the way I think. I think we can look at some of these experiences and see how some of these household names did kind of change their trajectory a little, and their work became different after spending time at Gemini.
Yes. Look, I've never made a big deal about meeting the artists. I was always worried, frankly, that if an artist's work meant a lot to me and I met them, and I heard so much that artists were so temperamental, I was always worried that if I met some artists whose work I loved and they were just a jerk, I'd sit there being so frustrated when I looked at the work that I live with and think, why did you create this conflict for me? I'd rather not have met you. But I've been lucky to end up meeting many of the major artists. And I must tell you, maybe because of the big program I have where I create this big educational art program, we've had 180 exhibitions, 120 museums, big museums, lots of regional museums, university museums. We do it all for free. We then fund outreach to bring kids of color in, audiences they may not be bringing in. We've done more exhibitions of artists of color, women, Hispanics, Asians, and lots of Caucasian men and women too. So maybe they're extra nice to me because I get their work out to all these audiences. And certainly we're not competing with MoMA and LACMA, all these giant museums that are fabulous. We're so lucky to have the Met and everybody. But we do get art out to lots of less served communities. But they've been wonderful to me. Interesting story was with Ellsworth Kelly. I called him up about something, and then I said, I don't want you to be mad at me, but your paintings are really pretty good. And your sculptures, those big totems, are just breathtaking. But I said, frankly, they can't hold a candle to your works on paper. I think they're the best of what you do. Now, frankly, I see his paintings and my knees just buckle. His sculptures, breathtaking. But I think his work, the 325 things he did, were utterly, utterly incredible. The way he was to work with Gemini and all those editions, the way he is able to be this master colorist, eliminate all distraction with these gorgeous abstract shapes. You look at them and they just take you on this journey. Now, what that journey is unique to each individual. But that's a case where it was fun to watch the 15, 18 years I knew him, the way he'd worked with James Reed, the master printer. They were like a married couple. I mean, James could basically finish Ellsworth's sentences, and Ellsworth would only make prints with him. So, like any relationship, you can't dictate and legislate, get along. Relationships take time to build trust and learn how to work with, talk, and interact with each other, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a business relationship. And it was fun to see the way they would go back and forth and what would result in, for millenniums to come, an amazing body of work.
You mentioned earlier Richard Serra, and a half dozen years ago, I got to see that show at the Nasher in Dallas of Richard Serra prints, and it really kind of transformed my perception of what printmaking could be. I mean, just the texture on those is really beyond what you could ever imagine a print to be, right? And I understand that you had quite a hand in bringing that show that I saw to fruition.
Yes, we got a call from Jeremy Strick, the director, and I do have 150 Richard Serras, the largest private collection of his works on paper, and was delighted. I'd been to the Nasher before because I had some early friends in law school from Fort Worth and had visited them often. I have other friends in Dallas, and just wish we had some real estate there. Maybe we'll get to Texas. I've wanted to for 10 years. It's such an important metropolitan area, Dallas-Fort Worth. But we had to fund there a whole bunch of sort of drapery things on the ceiling, because the way that was designed, it brings in wonderful natural light, but maybe a little bit too much for the prints. But since they are, a sculpture museum, it was a natural to tie in, since they have a Richard Serra in the sculpture garden there, and a very special exhibition. As usual, the curators were able to pick whatever they wanted, and I saw the checklist, thought it was fabulous. So it's interesting on that exhibition. I called up Sid Felsen. I said, look, let's bring you all down for the opening, and let's bring Javier, and let's bring your staff too. So I think either I funded, they funded, or whatever it was, but we brought the whole Gemini team down so they could come to an opening. And I've had a number of very special art moments in my life that I treasure. One of them was at that museum. So whenever I would go to Gemini over the years, I'd always go back into the back and watch the printers be working on things. Once in a while, an artist would be there, Julie Mehretu or Boucher or somebody, whatever. But and I'd always go to Sid Felsen's office, which is like a shrine with all the photographs. But I'd gotten to know Javier, who had done a lot of Richard Serra's work after James Reed. And so I walk in the exhibition, and I'm with Javier, and I'm looking at the amazing work that's up on the walls, and he gets a call. And I only hear my side of it. And it's, yes, Richard. Yes, that's over there. Oh, you'd really like the way they hung this. Yes. No. This is wonderful here, whatever. it was so special for me because, as important as the artist is, I also put Javier on a pedestal and all the other master printers, because it's that partnership. Look, no different than Michelangelo doing the Sistine Chapel. He had assistants. I mean, artists have used staff for years to help them. But in this case, it's so intimate, having a master printer and the artist. A very special moment for me. I later did meet Richard Serra. We had a show of his work at the Fralin Museum at the University of Virginia. And again, he didn't show up for it, but we had about 80 of his works, and they did a wonderful job. And about a week later, I went to Los Angeles and I went to LACMA for a funeral service for Stanley Grinstein. And I sit with Sid Felsen and Joni Welch. And they said, "Hey, do you know Richard Serra?" I said, "I've never met him." He said, "Well, he's right across the aisle, sitting right there." And I went over to him. I said, "Gee, you Richard Serra?" He said, "Yes, my name's Jordan Schnitzer. We haven't met, but I have 150 of your things." He said, 150? I said, "Yes, I'm so lucky. And we've had exhibitions of your work in a number of museums." He said, "Really?" I said, "Let me tell you about one last week. I was at the University of Virginia. It's like February. Friday night, we had all their board of trustees of the museum and the donors and whatever. And yes, we gave a talk, and they also had some student curators that gave wonderful talks. But Saturday night was open to the public. And it opened at 6:00. And I got there at 5:30. And it was cold, like 18 degrees or something. There were 150 kids all in line to get in the museum. So I assumed, of course, that it must be for some class. So I went up and said, "Oh, what class are you taking that you're required to come to the museum to see Richard Serra's work?" They said, "No, there's no class. We just wanted to see his work. We've heard so much about him." I talked to 3 or 4 students. I'm telling Richard Serra this. I said, "They were sitting in the cold for a half an hour to come see your show." Wow. And he got very emotional. It both reinforced how lucky I am that I have his work, lucky that Gemini printed it, and lucky we were able to get it out to a new audience that maybe never seen Richard Serra's amazing works on paper sculptures.
And it's just a wonderful opportunity for you to share that with him in his lifetime. Like, I was having a conversation recently with someone in the art world, just talking about how we produce things, we put things out there, and whether you're an artist or a writer, you never have a clear perception as the artist or the creator as to what your work really is, how other people view your work. You're kind of you're in Plato's cave drawing on the wall, right? You don't know what the perception is. So I think being able to share that story with him was probably a great gift.
I hope so, and I think it was, because someone at his level knows he could probably call up any museum in the world. And he has his work, and he passed away, basically a month ago or so. But the fact that not that the University of Virginia it's a major university, but we were getting his work out to a less served audience, to students, maybe some are from sophisticated families that go to museums. Many maybe had never been to a museum. But the fact that we worked hard to get students at that museum on their campus and to see his work, maybe, just maybe, if it's just one student that somehow was inspired by his work and heard his art voice, that maybe shaped and formed that young person's life in some way, then I feel so lucky to be the steward, the facilitator, because for me, my collection's all about the art and the audience. Not me. I didn't create it. I'm just the working stiff that helps, lucky enough to buy it and lucky enough to share it. But that brings me, as I've said before, there's no one you've ever talked to that has as much passion about art and loves it. But the passion I have about the art is way overtaken by the joy I have in sharing the art.
Sure.
Of Gemini's 2,700 works, we have about 1,500 or 1,600. And again, feel so lucky to have that work. and I know I keep harping on, your audience probably is sick of me saying it, the happenstance that 76 of the biggest artists of our time all ended up working there. That's never going to happen again. There'll never be a gallery, even Gagosian, no matter who it is, any of the print places. This was that special a time. And the fact that right now there's an exhibition that lets you walk through and dance through the photographs and many of the prints they made is, I think, a delicious experience.
Your story about the museum opening with inclement weather, I saw a video of when this show opened back in February at the Getty on a rainy night. The place was packed, and it wasn't just Sydney's there, about to be 100, but you start looking around the room, and not only is there Jordan Schnitzer, but there's Frank Gehry, there's Julie Mehretu. It's a real testament of the love and respect for Sidney and Gemini, right?
Well, he's so unassuming. He doesn't wear his ego on his sleeve. In terms of our relationship, I don't remember when I first met him. It may have been on into Gemini, or maybe at one of the art print fairs, whatever, but he's usually surrounded by, between his wife and the Grinstein girls and everybody else, a whole bunch of women. And he sort of enjoyed my company, and we seemed to have some wonderful chemistry. We talked about everything over the world, politics, life, Los Angeles, art, artists, whatever. And my affection for him is like an uncle to me. I mean, I have such utter professional respect and such personal affection for how much he's been welcoming to me and open to me, and my sharing so much with him. In life, we are lucky enough in the serendipity of just meeting people, and he's one of those people that's meant so much to me. I believe, yes, I'm a customer, but I believe if I'd only bought one thing instead of hundreds, there'd still be the same affection and respect. And so for me to be able to have helped fund at the Getty the exhibition that honors someone that I have such utmost respect for is something that warms my heart and is part of my legacy.
Last week, I had an interview with Jeffrey Deitch about a new book about the Le Déjeuner Célèbre project that he did as an exhibition, and now they've released a book kind of commemorating that pulling together. And I was asking him about, well, you challenged all these living artists, but then there were those artists who had kind of pursued the same theme before, and he shared that, well, the real treasure was our ability to get this one painting from Jordan Schnitzer that was part of your parents' collection. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and Jeffrey is one of the major art people in the same time frame. He has an uncanny ability. There are lots of gallery owners and dealers, and they're good peddlers. I don't mean that in a negative way. They sell art. Jeffrey is as much a curator and a connoisseur of art. So many of his exhibitions are brilliantly thought out. So yes, he did an exhibition and borrowed one of Robert Colescott's works, a major work we have of his, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, the work that Howell Colescott did. Robert Colescott came to Portland in 1960-61, was teaching at Portland State University. My mother just opened her gallery, went to see some of his work, went to see him, said, I'm Arlene Schnitzer, just started the Fountain Gallery. I'd like you to be an artist in my gallery. He said, has he seen my work? She said, yes. I went down to Salem, Oregon to see a local show. And they became fast friends, and she was his biggest dealer for his whole life. Unfortunately, his work wouldn't sell for anything. Now, the early work was very pastoral scenes, bowls of fruit, tables, whatever. In 1969, on a Fulbright to Egypt, teaching at an American school in Alexandria, Nasser takes over the Suez Canal. British and American troops are there, not safe. He goes to Paris with his wife. They left everything and took a suitcase of clothes. And in Paris, he did some introspection where he realized that he was living his life more in the white man's world, the Caucasian world, than facing the reality of his being an African Black American citizen. He told us the story when he was 9, his brother Warrington was 11. His mother took them aside and said, look, this is 1938. It is very difficult to be a Black man in America. You're light enough skin to pass, was the word. And this is your mother telling you this. Don't you second guess me, and don't you ever look back. Well, he did look back. And he realized that he wasn't quite who he wanted to be in terms of his values. So getting back to the painting, the first probably 80 paintings he did is he took major known paintings and he used them as a backdrop, but he changed all the faces. The Washington crossing the Delaware that George Lucas just paid $14 million for. He changed the faces. And why? Because he wanted to shake us up. I said earlier, my opinion is that artists are always chroniclers of our time. So they have a job. Their job is to first create art that somehow gets us to stop and look at it. Because it doesn't matter if we just walk by it, it doesn't matter what that artist is trying to convey to us. So you see these works, they look familiar, you go on up to it, then pow, he gets you. He changes all those faces, it throws you off, and it forces you to think. Again, what you think is unique to each individual. So unfortunately, during his lifetime, he died 5 years ago, he was not particularly well known or respected. Then we helped fund an exhibition at the Cincinnati Museum, and then it went to Portland Art Museum, and then the new museum in New York, which really rocketed his recognition. And I think now I'm so pleased I'm close to his sons, and they're trying to work on his legacy and a lot of work they still have. But in seeing his work in that show that Jeffrey Deitch put on, where that work was in along with others, was brilliantly conceived and as important an exhibition as anything at LACMA, MoMA, Met, Tate, whatever. So kudos to Jeffrey for continuing to come up with these creative ideas and exhibitions that challenge us and expand our experiences and knowledge of many new artists.
Jordan, you were lucky enough to grow up in a home where you had unfettered access to art. And I think I read where you purchased your first piece with your own money, I want to say at like age 12.
Or 14. 14. I had to save up at 12 when I was 14.
So it's always been part of your life. What criteria do you use when you're do you even know at this point? Is it purely a gut reaction? What appeals to you, or is there something you look for? Is there something about the artist, a narrative? Is it just physical or emotional response you have to a piece? What is your criteria?
The answer is yes. Next question, though. Wonderful question. Thank you for asking. I've had this 180 exhibitions, 120 museums. I don't go to all the openings anymore. There are too many, but so often I'm asked, this abstract art, why can't these people just paint some nice bowls of fruit and landscapes? And I say, well, virtually all of them went to art school. They painted lots of bowls of fruit and lots of portraits. But let me tell you something. I'll say to the audience, aren't you all artists? Didn't you take art in grade school, high school? How many times have you been in a restaurant where there's some butcher paper and you take some crayons and you scribble? You're all artists. But to be in this museum, a couple things have to happen. First, I think you genetically have to have this predisposition to an aesthetic. Look at the way we all dress. I'm so envious of some of the guys I know that just have a bit more style than me and put together a pocket scarf and whatever. I tend to wear the same old clothes, even though I buy different ones. I just seem to look schlumpy and whatever. Okay. So the artists, they have to be a predisposition to an aesthetic that's more than most of us. Next, they have to follow their heart and decide they want to be an artist. Then they got to be in the right place at the right time, and they have to do something different. Because if we went to an exhibition of Van Gogh knockoffs, I get that might be real interesting. A lot of Saturday painters and do a Van Gogh. There's that Hemingway contest at the bar in Venice, whatever. So an artist has to have a burning issue inside them that they want to rip open their soul and put it on a painting, a sculpture, whatever, and let you and I and everyone else in your podcast look at it, frown, smile, challenge it. It's really pretty putting yourself out there. And they got to do it, as I said, in a different way, because we've had all the other artists. Robert Colescott, brilliant that way. The stuff he did shook the world up. Unfortunately, the world that shook up initially was a very limited one. Now, with his exposure, it's huge. So what I say to people about abstract art, I say, think about music. When was the last time you heard some new song you liked and you got into the vibe and you started, bouncing around or whatever? Now, I would suggest, unless you were a musician, you don't really sit there, us lay folks, and think, well, how is it mixed? What's the tempo? When do the instruments come in? We just like it. Don't confuse me with the facts. Now, if you're a musician or a person that works in a studio, you may say, boy, how do they move all those hundreds of dials and whatever? Food. God, you try some new food. Unless you're a cook, you don't sit there and say, well, what temperature? When do they put this in? Mix it. Just enjoy it. What I say about art is interesting. We are so conditioned visual, when we see things visually, to instantly have to have an answer as to what it is, what's going on, whatever. And somehow we feel threatened if we don't understand it instantly. So what I say about art to people is, stop thinking and just start feeling. Second of all, it's okay not to like any of this art. It's okay. The artist would appreciate that. If the art god came down and she said, hey, artist, I'll make everyone who ever sees your art love it, I think that would defeat an artist. That would defeat any of us. If someone said, hey, every podcast you do is going to get to 50 million people. I mean, we get up and we challenge. We try to be good at what we do. We keep learning, growing. So back the artist, what I say to people is, look, first, go to galleries. They're free. Walk in. You can ask any question. The gallery people love it when you ask, well, what's going on with this art? Why did you decide to bring this artist in your gallery? Go to museums. Go to a lecture. And I guarantee you, go to a Saturday market and look at some $5, some what it's $10, whatever it is. And I guarantee you, if you do that and stop setting these goalposts for yourself, something will suddenly speak out to you. And if it's in your budget, if it's $10 from a Saturday market, or it's 100 or 1,000 or more, whatever, okay, then buy it, live with it, enjoy it. Let it be there in the morning when you wake up. Sure. When you come home and you're frustrated or you're happy, let it be part of your life. And I would hope then, like I've been blessed, art is so important to me. So that's my advice to those that want to collect art or either don't know how or frustrated, whatever, is just give it a chance. The other thing I would suggest, and if there's anything in this podcast, actually, from my standpoint, that I would hope people remember is this. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. You're going to see your grandkids on Saturday morning. And they want to know when they want to go to Walmart to the toy section. It used to be Toys R Us, but we want some toys. You're sitting there thinking, oh my God, what do I do with them? Do I take them to a playground, whatever? Okay. Take them to a gallery. Take them to a museum, even if it's 15 minutes. For their next birthday, Christmas, Hanukkah, Easter. Instead of just getting that Barbie doll or the Hasbro toy or whatever, get them a little piece of art, $10, whatever your budget is. And I guarantee you, money back guarantee, that years from now, they probably won't have that little Star Wars toy or that Barbie doll, but they maybe have that little paperweight thing or that little tiny little painting you got or whatever, let alone a print or something. So that's my advice. It's interesting. I've been asked to speak at some different wealth management conferences. And I'll go there for the US Bank Ascent or JP Morgan, and I'll sit there and I'll say, if you're lucky enough, you've worked hard to create some assets, you're working with these wonderful wealth management people. And they're talking about how to invest the fund, stocks, bonds, venture, hedge, whatever. And then you're talking about your estate plan. Do you leave some money for your kids, pay for education, do this, that, whatever, let them help buy a house, whatever. You want to give back. You want your kids and grandkids, nieces and nephews to maybe have a little bit easier time than you had. Now, as to what you do, it's up to you. In my case, I worked hard, created some wealth. My kids are living pretty well, but they don't get much till they're 45. But I said, in the end, all you parents and grandparents, what you're most interested in is having your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews have good values, want to get up in the morning and want to make a difference. Whether that's working at an AutoZone store, helping someone get the right auto parts, or being a PhD working on cancer research. In my opinion, what people do is less important than they do the best they're able to do given their abilities and their education and their drive. So what I would suggest to you, as important as all the money you want to leave your kids and whatever, the most important gift you can give them is an appreciation for the arts. Because your children, your grandchildren, you don't have a wand to wave, so they won't have ups and downs in their romantic relationships, health issues, job issues, all the issues that we all go through. But if you give them appreciation for the arts, music, dance, visual arts, maybe, just maybe when they're dealing with those difficult life issues, they can have a break and go to a concert, go to a dance, go to a museum, see some art, or look at some art around them in their house. And maybe that takes them on a little journey, takes them away from their problems, and lets them be inspired and go back to their problems with a fresh, better perspective to do the best they can of resolving those issues.
It just reminds me, Keith Haring used to say, art is for everybody. And I know that you own some important Haring prints. And it makes me think that prints and editions are probably the absolute best place where somebody could start collecting. Your accessibility to important, amazing artists is better in this space than just about anywhere else.
Yes, because while I've said go to a Saturday market, get some local art, whatever, I mean, it's true. But also, I've always found, and I would think you and your audience too, that there's something about excellence, about the best of things, that's even more inspiring. And therefore, whether you pick Donald Salt, I mean, I can name a number of artists, Alison Sarr, a lot of the current artists and so forth. Well, for many people, their paintings are a little pretty expensive. I mean, relative to someone's income. But you can buy, and they're not cheap, but you can go to print fairs, and for $50, $100, $250, $500, $1,000, you can get really quality work by major artists. So prints are one way to sort of enter the art world by getting something that's very high quality at a reasonably modest, and I know that's a loaded word, a price. Now for me, while I work hard in my real estate business, I have offices up on the West Coast and millions of feet of property, and I want that to appreciate. For me, the art, I've never ever looked at art as an investment vehicle. Now, some people do, and that's fine. But for me, the biggest return on my art purchases is the joy I have experiencing the art and, again, sharing the art. So I'd suggest to people, too, that if they're lucky enough with whatever job they have, they're a software engineer, they're a doctor, they're a landscape person, whatever, is if you buy good art, it'll probably end up being a good investment. But don't look at it as an investment. Look at it as an investment in your appreciation of being healthy and alive and able to experience the art.
Jordan, I can't say thank you enough for you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me about what's been an inspiring conversation about your passion for art, the passion that Sidney Felsen documented all those years through the life of Gemini The show that we were discussing is still up at the Getty Center through July 7th. It's called First Came a Friendship, Sidney B. Felsen and the artists of Gemini G.E.L. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I know if he were on the podcast with me right now, he would also say hip, hip, hooray to this idea that not only if you're around LA, go see that exhibition, but you grandparents and parents, get art in your children's lives.
Wonderful. That's all the time we have for this week. You've been listening to Art Sense. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. If you've enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. And while you're there, please rate the show and leave a quick review. Your feedback is the key to other folks finding us. And if you'd like to see images related to the conversation, read the transcript, and find other bonus features, you can go to cambia.art and click on the podcast tab. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at craig@cambia.art. Thanks for listening.